And here we go. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to our Converge and Nutanix coffee chat. I'm pleased to bring you Charlie McElvy, Nutanix National Partner Channel SE, and Rick Davies, Converge Senior Solution Architect, Innovation Center, and Internal Lab Manager. And they're going to take it away.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining. So as Annie kindly introduced me, I'm the channel engineer assigned to Converge nationally. I work with Rick and his peers and the sales teams and stuff like that at Converge to help them, to enable them on Nutanix. And I think that's why we're here today, right, Rick?
That is correct. Yes, sir. We're here to talk about Nutanix and what it can do for us in the multi-cloud journey that everybody seems to be on today.
Yeah, it's a wild journey, that's for sure. So I don't know, Annie, do you want me to throw up a couple of slides just to keep people talking and then just kind of move from there?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Charlie.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm going to start sharing. We didn't practice this, so wish me luck. But I do want to say I do not. Rick and I really want to chat and kind of just like talk about stuff. So for those who may not be familiar with Nutanix, I'll give a super quick intro. I am going to do my best to not go through the slide deck fully, but just to throw it up there and just to again get some conversation started or some thoughts started around Nutanix in general. And I don't know, Rick, we can just kind of shoot the bull as we go through that, right?
Absolutely. Now I am limited only because of the challenges I faced today in getting connected. So I am on audio only, so I cannot see your slides. Charlie, just remember that. So we'll have to feed off you, and we'll go from there.
Actually, that might make it more fun. I'll have to quiz you and see if you can guess what the slide is. I'm just kidding, dude. I wouldn't do that. So, all right. Well, first off, we already introduced ourselves. So Rick Davies is a Senior Solutions Architect at Converge. Rick and I met for the first time officially in Atlanta, right, man?
Correct. Yep.
Yep. We had a nice little
and we had spoken before, but not really had much interaction personally. So it was always good to meet you and get to know you a little bit more personal level.
That's the fun part, is actually when you actually get to meet somebody for once. You do all these virtual sessions and you go, oh, this dude's actually taller than me, which I don't say that very often, but because I'm 6'2" and some change for those who haven't met me in person. And again, I'm Charlie. And Annie, thank you again for hosting this with us. I'm going to jump in and just start with, for those who don't know Nutanix, if you know Nutanix, kind of give me just a few seconds to kind of run through a few things and just talk about who Nutanix is, why we were born in the first place in 2009, and then where we are today. And then Rick, if I say anything that, like sparks an idea, or anybody in the Q&A pops up, just let me know. Nutanix was founded, for those who don't know, was founded and by a couple engineers, a bunch of engineers rather, from VMware and Google and so forth back in the early 2000s, mid to late 2000s rather. And the whole idea was, let's simplify the data center because things have gotten too complex. And to be truthful, nothing's changed in the last 2 decades. It's just gotten more complex, if not easier. And just keep that in mind, that's Nutanix's theme throughout its entire evolution, is just keep everything as simple as possible when it comes to whatever we're doing in the data center. And as the data center itself has evolved over the years, Nutanix has evolved with it, and we've been perfectly fitted to do just that throughout the entire 15 plus years now that we've been active in the business. So these are things that your CIOs, if you're a CIO, you face. It's things like modernizing infrastructure, which is where Nutanix really started. Modernizing infrastructure, simplifying the interfaces, simplifying management, moving into modernizing apps. You can't read a tech rag today. You can't open the register or go to Reddit and read some of the technology chats and threads without coming across something around AI. It's an inevitability. And while AI has been around for almost 60 years now in different facets and forms, today, really since ChatGPT hit the market publicly, it has really accelerated and exponentiated the timelines, or truncated the timeline rather, for AI deployment. So everyone's talking about AI. Now, what are they doing with it? How are they using it? Are they monetizing it? Are they using it to save money? Those are all different contexts, and everyone has their own story around it. But there isn't a CIO or CTO, or frankly a CEO, that isn't thinking about what they're going to do with AI. And then next, moving into extending across clouds. Back in 2011 to 2013, I was a cloud consultant, and I spent most of my time explaining what cloud is and isn't. And today, I think we're past that finally, and 10 years later, and now we're talking about how do we use the cloud in the most effective, efficient manner possible. And Nutanix helps with that. And then, of course, enabling modern portable apps. Another thing you can't really escape these days when you read technology magazines is containerization. Containers are the new VMs in a sense. It's maybe an evolution of a VM if you want to think of it that way. I agree with most analysts that I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a disproportionate flip from VMs to containers. I don't think VMs are dying, but I do think they're evolving. And I think because of the rapid time to deployment that businesses need, your business needs to make sure that you're competitive in the marketplace, containers provides that portability, that fast time to market, because you don't have to completely recode the whole thing. You repackage it and you send it out for a new OS or a new hypervisor or whatever the underlying infrastructure is. And that has made apps even more agile and portable than ever. And the great news is that Nutanix fits all across the board there. And I know CTS, Converge does a lot with all of those things. So I know Converge has a very robust, strong AI practice built around Nutanix at one layer, as well as IBM Watson and other components. And of course, app modernization is a big play for Converge, and they have all the services needed around it. And that's why we love them as partners. I know Gotti, my CSM, and I are very happy to work with Converge because of their depth of skill.
Yep, and Charlie, I'll touch a little bit on that, right? So in terms of our teams, we have dedicated teams with AI. We have dedicated data scientists working on those teams and looking at all of the things you mentioned around AI, right, in terms of how to run it, how to make it better, how to improve upon deployments, and how we can actually help customers and help our customers go through and get those deployed, as well as in some cases monetize it. And then from an app modernization perspective, we have teams dedicated to helping customers do that as well. And so they're both quite large in terms of teams and capabilities. And for any of our customers on the phone right now, or any potential customers on the phone right now, if you want to reach out, we can definitely get in touch and go through what capabilities we have and what types of offerings we have around those two specific pillars.
Yep. Thanks, Rick. That's awesome, dude. And I did flip through, for those watching, I did flip through a bunch of slides real fast because you know what, I'm not here to sell and pitch you things. I really want to kind of chat with Rick a little bit more, but I do want to give a little intro on Nutanix. And for those who don't know us, you'll hear about Nutanix being a platform. And I want to emphasize that, like, we're foundational to most everything you're going to do in the data center and foundational to running all of your modern apps or modernizing your apps and then running them. And what we don't do, the screen that I'm showing you is just a bunch of selected logos from partners. This is clearly not all our partners. I don't have a slide big enough to put all our partners on here. But doesn't matter the vertical, doesn't matter the space, it doesn't matter the technology grouping or what you're doing. Nutanix and our partners, whether it's Converge or an ISV or a combination of the two, can deliver those solutions. And so Nutanix is foundational to all of those things. This is a quick snapshot of what Nutanix looks like today. Don't pay a lot of detail to this. The base context is this. We have the infrastructure layer, which is the bottom, foundational to what we do. The middle layer is full of different services, whether it's storage services, data services for Kubernetes, which is on this slide, this is dated, is outlined, and dots, meaning it's coming, it's here. We GA'd this back in November. And then at the top layer is just the management layer. So a simpler view of this is infrastructure layer, services layer, and then management layer. And that's it. And Nutanix will run anywhere, doesn't matter whether it's public cloud or on-premises or colo or managed service provider like Converge or some combination of the 3 or 4. Will actually run anywhere, and you, when it comes to managing, actually only log into one interface for all of those, which is actually really cool. All right.
And while we have a moment, I'm going to check real quick, and again, because I can't see anything, just making sure we have no questions or raised hands in the chat for anything.
Not yet.
All right. So
excellent.
I'll wrap it up with this, and I have a weird little white block on my slide here. I'll have to look at that later. But Nutanix really is here to provide your customers with choice, ultimately, and simplified management. So you can get back into the business of innovation If you're a data scientist, for example, we talked about AI earlier, you don't really care about what you're running it on. You just care that it runs your inferencing and your data and analytics platforms and so forth like that. And so we give that back to you, give that time back to you, so you don't have to sit there and manage the systems constantly. That's one of the beauties of Nutanix. It's designed, we have designed it to run virtually anywhere. And that's the theme of our Global Tech Summit. Rick and I were just at that 2 weeks ago, Rick, in lovely Austin, Texas. That was a fun experience. But correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, but I think what we presented to you guys as partners was really run any app anywhere and how you want to run it, right?
Correct. Yeah, and the great part is it really does work that way. In a lot of cases, you hear that, you look at things a little bit skeptically and you go, is that really true? But in this case, it really is. And, I think, and some of the announcements that we heard really, really kind of solidified in my mind the benefits that Nutanix is going to bring to the table as we move forward, and especially with the way the landscape is changing today, with acquisitions and some of the pain points that we've hit in regards to licenses and how things are happening, and some of the pain points customers are experiencing. Nutanix is really going to bring forth the benefits that we've stated, and be able to help customers out with all of those pain points and more.
No, dude, well said. And this last slide just says one platform to run apps and data anywhere. I only read that out loud for Rick since he's the one that can't see it. And that being Nutanix. So if you have any questions on that, any of the pieces and parts I talked about, I did blow through that really fast just because, again, I don't want to kill you with slideware. I just want to chat a little bit. So I'm gonna pull off the share here. And Rick, so we were at Tech Summit 2 weeks ago. First off, let me ask you a question. What was your favorite thing did you eat anything off campus? And what was your favorite thing that you ate off campus?
Actually, I'm always a fan, especially in Austin, of getting barbecue, right? I mean, get some good old Texas barbecue. So having some good Texas barbecue was really good. And, of course, having the time with my peers, having the time with you guys, sitting down, having a beer, being able to discuss these things and how they work, it really just kind of solidifies that I think Nutanix is going to be a great platform for not only our customers, but also for us moving forward as we help customers in their multi-cloud journey.
So follow-up question, did you manage to make it over to Terry Black's before you left?
No, but I've been there before. Great food, not very cost effective, but We'll leave it at that. That's all I'll say.
Let's see, we have a chat. Oh, Chris, thank you for being here as well. So I'll flip it over to you, Rick. Since you were at Tech Summit and you saw some of the announcements, you probably went to some sessions I didn't make it to for various reasons. What kind of things came out of there that you want to talk about?
I think for me, one of the best sessions was around the AI offerings that Nutanix is bringing to the table, right? And the one I remember most distinctly, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but in terms of the performance that Nutanix was seeing with their AI infrastructure offering, I remember hearing that based on the performance testing that was done, right? Nutanix's file system and the way it was working actually offered superior I/O numbers to a lot of the other solutions that are out there. And, given the distributed nature of the file system and how it works, it's not hard to understand, right? Especially as we get into getting into tuning and we look at the actual underlying performance tuning of the infrastructure and of the nodes that make up the Nutanix clusters. It really struck me that as we go forward, right, and especially with the amount of I/O, IOPS, and bandwidth that's going to be required, having the Nutanix solution and the way that it's architected really, really helps with making sure that we're being able to feed those GPUs and the other things for inference and for everything else that we're doing, and make sure that we're not finding ourselves in a glut when it comes down to doing all of those AI functions.
Yeah, that was it's funny. So I'm glad they shared that with you guys, the partner space. They shared it with us a few weeks before that. It was a report done through a combination of IDC, some performance metrics company, and of course Nutanix. And obviously Nutanix funded because somebody's got to pay for somebody to do the analytics. But when I saw the numbers, I was like, you guys are crazy, right? We're blowing it out. And part of me, so I'm an old AIX guy. So like resource aggregation and pooling and stuff like that is not unfamiliar to me. I've done it for 25 years. But and yes, folks, I'm that old. But it's been really eye-opening to me that, we continue to latch ourselves to, and obviously I'm saying this as a Nutanix employee, but I'd say it as a partner too, which I was for 10 years. We continue to latch ourselves to antiquated, hardware. And some of it's by design, some of it's by necessity, and necessity could be that's just what we do, it's what we know. That is a necessity, and it's a valuable one, not one to be, ignored. But at the same time, we have traditionally latched ourselves to three-tier and legacy hardware and all the latency and stuff like that comes with it. And we've ignored, especially for our high performance stuff, the platforms that would provide these things like you talked about, these metrics that are real and they're achievable, and they scale almost linearly. Or near linearly, and that's something that I think we need to bring up. I think Nutanix says I think we do a poor job of actually articulating just how great our performance really is. Everyone wants to get into an IOPS conversation or a speeds and feeds conversations, but what it really comes down to is actual real world performance. We can talk speeds and feeds and IOP throughputs and stuff like that, but ours scales. I mean, the more you add nodes, the more it scales. Yeah, of course, cost goes up, but that's also true in the three-tier world. So yeah, I think it was great that they shared that with you guys, but I was still blown away when I see that chart and the way they presented it to you guys. I saw the numbers, but when I saw the chart and I saw the bar graph was like this and the other ones were like this, and I was going, holy smokes, dude, that's crazy. So yeah, that was a fun session.
How about you, Charlie? What was your favorite output from that GTS sessions? Did you have one? And you may be privy to other sessions that we were not able to get into, but what was your favorite?
Wow, that's a good question. So I don't know if you attended this one or not. At first, I had to digest it before I decided I liked it, which sounds like I'm prefacing it with a bad thing. But there was a session that Damon Bear did on how to be a better SE with AI. And at first, I thought it was going to be like, oh, how to sell Nutanix AI. Let's go. And instead, I get in the session, and he's talking about using Copilot and Chat GPT and a few other AI tools, and then exporting the outputs into from book reading. So I'll contextualize it for everybody else who wasn't there, who weren't there. Damon had taken Copilot, I think it was, or maybe it was Chat GPT, but he took one of the tools, and he said, "Hey, summarize the top 100 how to be a better engineer, kind of a SE books that are out there and/or sales. Summarize them." And then distill it down to key points, and then export that to an Excel spreadsheet. And so he did that with a few other things. And I'm going to do it. It's going to be poor description here, but he's going to take all these outputs, and then he further used AI to aggregate the outputs and to create a consolidated summarization of this and distillation of this whole set of data. And then he was able to consume that instead of having to try to read 120 something books plus visit these websites and blogs and all this other stuff. He had all that stuff distilled down, and then kind of cut off the fat and trimmed it down to this perfect fillet, and it was grilled and cooked perfectly. So he was able to consume it and enjoy it and take the value out of the nutrition, right, so to speak. So as I take that steak message forward there, I know this is a coffee chat, but I don't really drink coffee, so I'm gonna use steak as my metaphors for the day.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it's a very apropos description of even today what we have to do with all of the information that we have to consume, both as me and you as being SEs or architects, and what we have to work with to kind of go through and educate our customers on what all the different options are, especially given the landscape of acquisitions and licensing changes and things like that, and then of course increased costs and how the customers can best spend their dollars and the return that they get for spending those dollars, which again is going to lead back to the Nutanix landscape and understanding the benefits that can bring, especially around the hyper-converged infrastructure and how we can go through and really tune that for performance. And it's not just around AI, right? This is around any other workloads, and this includes containerization, this includes VMs, and all of the other applications. And so I think when we get down to it and we distill it down to its basis form, we can actually help our customers do more with less in a lot of cases. And so I think that's a very appealing discussion to have. And of course, I say that it may not be applicable to every discussion that we have, but I think having those discussions and having very frank discussions about where we are today and where we're going in the future, where our customers would like to go in the future, can really help us help them decide on what their future is going to look like.
Yeah, and I think that's great. You know, what's funny is you mentioned hyper-converged, and so I was just at a healthcare event in Tennessee, and fortunately, I made it home through the weather. Um, that was a joy, right? That's a whole hour-long conversation all by itself. But while we were there, we were talking about hyper-converged because somebody asked a question in the audience. They said, "So I thought Nutanix was like a hyper-converged platform." And TJ, one of our sales regional directors, looked at me and I looked at him, and we saw that coming, you know. And we are sure at the most basic level. That's what Nutanix is and has been. But really now, what Nutanix has become, and much to your point, Rick, is we've not moved away from HCI, but we've in fact built on that concept, and we moved into an enterprise cloud operating model. And so
Right.
what we used to just do for like VMs and data center, now we do, to your point, right? We do it for AI, or we do it for containers, or we do it for containers and VMs, or, you know, you can run your databases on it, or you want it, your heavy storage. Guess what? We've got customers with petabytes of healthcare records and PACS data. For those who don't know what PACS is, it's like radiology and MRI and all the other visual images that are logged and stored and tagged by user, patient in this case, and either archived or made accessible to clinicians for review and stuff like that. And that's all. It's both expensive. It's somewhat unstructured, it's like semi-structured data, and it's all of that. And we have customers running, you know, 24/7 mission critical. Again, this is healthcare. And they run on our platform exclusively. And Nutanix is literally out there, like TJ said, we're in the business of saving lives. Do you realize that? We keep businesses running. We just keep working. And I thought, what a great way to frame that. And it's all because of how we started, right, with the HCI space. And then again, how we've evolved over the years into being more than just HCI, but HCI enables us to move out of that. And in fact, you saw this 2 weeks ago that we're actually moving even away from HCI to where Nutanix will run, for example, our AI platform doesn't even require Nutanix infrastructure. You can run it right on top of AKS, Amazon Kubernetes Services, or Azure's. Sorry, that's EKS, and then Azure's or GCPs for that matter. So you don't even have to buy a whole suite Nutanix. You could just run Nutanix AI on top of bare metal cloud somewhere else. And so it's just really cool how we're kind of disaggregating ourselves away from the HCI thing and becoming a much more portable operating model for businesses.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing to mention that, right? And of course, a lot of the customers that I've talked to previously, one of their biggest concerns, especially with the, we'll call it the acquisition, I don't know if we want to go out by name, but the acquisition of a large virtualization company, and the changes that are going on there, right, and what choices customers are being given, right? Some of them are going to fit very well, some of them are not going to fit very well. But as we give customers more choices to go and look at, you know, how they can implement their infrastructure, whether it's, you know, infrastructure as a service, whether it's on site, whether it's, you know, a hybrid cloud model or multi-hybrid cloud model, choices are good. And giving customers more choices and not locking them into one specific model is always going to be a good thing versus having a very limited number of deployment models, or the ability to, or rather the non-ability to move between those choices very easily. And so I think the Nutanix model, yes, you're absolutely correct. Moving from what was, you know, generally considered a HCI model to now encompassing all of the changes in the industry is just proving that flexibility is key to making sure that your applications and your workloads are working for you versus you having to work for them.
Oh, I love the way you said that. That's I think that's great. And I'm flattered. So no, it's you're right. I mean, that's that's what I have loved about Nutanix as a partner. So I've been in Rick's shoes, and in fact, I was a director, and my whole team was very Nutanix familiar, if not super capable. And it's because we believed in it. And every SE that got their hands on Nutanix was like, "Whoa, this is really whiz bang cool." But the choice thing, and that the reference you made to what I call the Great Disruption. You can call it whatever you want to, but in my 20 plus years in IT, I've not seen a disruption so ominous to some people, and yet, but even those who don't, or good, bad, or indifferent about it, they look at it and they go, this makes me think, right? And if nothing else, customers should be thinking about what their next platform looks like. We've done the same thing for 30 years with the same folks. And lock-in has become a very serious threat for customers, regardless of who it is. And I think that's something that I'm proud to say that Nutanix, I was just having this conversation again 2 days ago in front of a bunch of partners and customers in the healthcare space about, back in the, when I first started, that one throat to choke was the phrase everybody used. It's an old IBM term, right? One throat to choke, and buy all of us, and that way you got one person to call. And then we got away from that, and we thought diversification was better. And when I say we, I mean IT. We all thought diversification was better, because why rely on one vendor? And if I'm stuck and they break down or they go out of business or something happens, they get acquired and everything changes, then now what, right? And so, but I think we've come full circle to where having that single non-locked in vendor model is efficient, it's effective, and it works. In most cases, it works better. In fact, almost all cases, I think it works better than having a multi-vendor strategy, because a multi-vendor means multiple persons of contact, multiple distributors, usually, multiple support models, multiple this, multiple that. And who has time to keep up with all that stuff? And Nutanix is doing everything we can. For those who are Nutanix customers, you've called support. Hopefully you haven't had to call support, but if you've ever had to call support, we don't have a tiered support structure. And so you get that one person who's on the call with you soup to nuts until it's resolved. And then, obviously you might hang up and be on the chat for a little bit and then get back on another call and multiple sessions depending on the severity of the issue. But we don't have like Sev 1, Sev 2, Sev 3 necessarily, where we just give you the cheapest guy or gal possible to answer the phone the first time, who could just barely read the screen. We give you an actual customer success engineer who their whole job is to know Nutanix well enough to begin the RCA process and the root cause analysis, go through the root cause analysis process and move you all the way through to success. And that's what we call them, customer success engineers. And we try to maintain that even with so we have multiple OEMs, for those who aren't aware. Like, you can buy Nutanix direct from Dell, you can buy Nutanix direct from Cisco, you can buy Nutanix direct from Lenovo, HPE, Fujitsu if you're not in the US. I think you can buy them in the US too. That's a good question, actually. I don't see very much of that. Or you can buy the Nutanix labeled platform from Supermicro. We call it NX. But in all of those strategies, we're trying to maintain that cohesion of support, because for us, our support record is impeccable, and we want to maintain that. So even if you have to call Cisco TAC, they'll do as much triage as they can. They're actually trained on Nutanix, but let's be honest, they're not, they're not Nutanix employees yet. Maybe we'll buy them one day. They're a small little company. That's a joke. But thank you for giggling, Rick, because you're the only one that can really giggle. But maybe they will get better and better and better to where they can resolve it all themselves. But you'll start with Cisco TAC, and then they'll bring on a Nutanix person, but they'll stay with you the whole time. So what we expect our OEM partners to act like we do in that context, because to your point, we don't have time. You customers don't have time. Partners don't have time to deal with this stuff. So Nutanix should be responsible, and I think we are. I think we do a good job with that. That was a long-winded way of saying I love our support model.
And I think one other thing, too, that comes out of that discussion, right, is when we look at the way that you have all of the different Nutanix products, and I think specifically in my mind, when we look at things like Flow, right, it's not a bolt-on. It's something that's built in, and then it's just an enablement with a license key, and it gives you the ability to immediately then begin the process of going through and getting that set up versus a deployment and an install and a configuration. I mean, you still have to do the configuration, obviously, if you enable flow, but the capabilities are built into the product, and it's just a simple license key that you use to enable them. And so that type of integration and the coupling of all of that together and the ability to turn that on if you desire to use that, I think is also very appealing. And being able to do that quickly, again, just goes to show that it's something that has been thought through and is a value, I think, in my mind at least, to our customers. So if they want to move down that path, rather than having to go through a separate deployment and having multiple potentially weeks of deployment time, right? It's already there. You just enable it, and then you go and start setting up the rules and setting up the flows and things like that. So, again, it's just a very easy, very simple way for our customers to realize the value of a Nutanix solution.
I love that you noted that. I think that's a great example of, Flow, for example, for most of our customers, they have at least one component of Flow in their solution stack, in their licensing structure. Like you said, it's not really a bolt-on. It can be bolted on, because most of our components can be done a la carte, but we really prefer to really build a platform for what the customer's end goals are, right? So it's an outcome-based platform when you're at the end of the day. And if someone needs microsegmentation, or if they need overlay networking components, or if they just want to virtualize the network, or maybe they're coming from an NSX world where they're used to doing all this rerouting and automated routing and automated profiles or policy-based profiles and stuff like that. You can do all of that in Nutanix Flow. In fact, we just upgraded it the week before GTS, actually, which I was surprised we didn't have any flow specific. I don't think we had any flow specific sessions, did we? I didn't see any.
Not flow specific, but they did mention some of the new functionality that was released with the upgrade. So it wasn't a full session, but in some of the sessions they did mention that.
Good. I think that's really critical, because we're almost to the point now where our Nutanix Move platform soon is going to GA again, a free version of Nutanix Move that will migrate NSX policies and protocols and stuff like that into Nutanix and automatically deploy those out through Flow Virtual Networking. So that's a pretty cool thing. And if we didn't talk about that at GTS, then shame on us, because I think that's even cooler.
Yeah, well, and I think that's another great thing that we can talk about, right, is the migration and looking at a migration from one hypervisor to Nutanix. And specifically, the ability, or the ease of use, I should say, of if a customer is feeling locked in or feeling like they would even want to consider moving, right, it is a very simple, well, I shouldn't say simple. It's a non-complex operation, right, because nothing is ever simple. Technology is great, but when it doesn't work, and sometimes you encounter problems. But everything that I have seen and the tools and the conversions I have done for several of my customers with the Move utility have gone swimmingly. I've had no issues whatsoever. Everything's been migrated easily. And so it is not we'll call it a complex thing that you have to do in order to move from one to another. So if you're unhappy with, licensing costs or whatever the case may be, and you want to consider moving to a different platform, having that ability to move seamlessly, or as seamlessly as possible, right? There's always that minor interruption. But with that being said, it's a very small interruption and can be mitigated very quickly, especially during a migration window or a outage window. But it does everything for you. And so you don't have to worry about it. You can do it in batches. You can do it singly. You can do all at once if you want, although I don't think any of my customers have been quite as ambitious as that. But it gives you that flexibility to go and do that and make sure that things are working as they should, and then you begin the process of migrating off of one platform to Nutanix.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of our secret sauces, is Nutanix Move. I mean, it's a free tool that can be downloaded right now. And at a crude, kind of process flow, it's super simple. To your point, at a lowest common level, it takes the VMs, it pops open the VMDK, and then it rewraps it, takes the data and rewraps it so that it works on Nutanix. And by the way, it's bi-directional, so it'll actually go back the other direction. That's the one thing I think I forgot to mention earlier. Is we're talking about lock-in. Nutanix forever has always been a non-lock-in company. I think the only way you can get locked into Nutanix is if you stop paying for your support contract and your CVMs go down. Obviously, to get the CVMs back up and running so you can move them off, you got to pay for support. but that's it. I mean, that's not even a real lock-in. That's just a consequence of not paying for your support. And so, the move tool, we give it to you and you can do these migrations. The hardest part, and to your point, Rick, like a migration is not simple. The actual process, the low level workflows might be easy, right? Like I just described very crudely, but which apps are tier 0, which have to go first, obviously domain controllers and stuff like that. So you've got to do some planning for your tier 0 and then your tier 1, 2, and 3 apps. And I think that's where partners come in. And then there is some downtime because you've got to reboot the app to get it to run on VM. You can't just like move it and expect it to keep going. Clearly there's going to have to be at least a small window of downtime, but once moved over, it's seamless. I mean, your end users will never know the difference because their applications work the way they're supposed to when they get them open the next morning.
Yeah, and that's something where we have, like partners like Converge, we have expertise in helping you do tests to make sure everything is working properly. I did want to ask you one question, Charlie, that I think everybody might be interested in, and we can probably dive down this. I know we're coming about 20 minutes out from the end of this, but from a multi-cloud perspective and the connectivity and the movement of those workloads, you want to talk a little bit about that and how Nutanix has integrated that into their workflow and how that all is connected and works. And so this way, if you need to, for instance, maybe burst out to the cloud, or if you want to move certain workloads out to the cloud or potentially even move them back, is that, I think that would be good for everybody to understand how that works.
Yeah. I think I'll start with the definition because I think Nutanix is very specific. When we say multi-cloud, I've sat down at partner and customer meetings and we talk about somebody says, oh yeah, I have a multi-cloud strategy, and I go, well, what is it? And they go, well, I have some workloads in Azure, I have some workloads in GCP, and I have some workloads in Amazon or Amazon, yeah. And I go, yeah, but can you just move them around? They're like, no, I got these workloads here and these workloads here. And I go, well, that's not a multi-cloud strategy. It's a multiple cloud strategy. That'd be like having 2 different data centers and they run completely different workloads. They don't cross-pollinate in any way, shape, or form. Nutanix provides a true multi-cloud platform. So first off, our licenses are portable. So if you bought on-premises licenses, yesterday, and then in March, your CIO says, you know what, we're going all in on the cloud, guys, let's go. And so you need to pick up and move. Well, Nutanix enables that. Like you don't have to go buy new Nutanix licenses. You do have to secure your cloud space. That's not us. We don't control that. And there's one kind of a license unlock that you have to get. We call it Nutanix Cloud Clusters, that enables a portal so that you can connect your Amazon or AWS and soon GCP accounts into that portal and then move your Nutanix licenses into there onto some bare metal. With partnerships at AWS and Azure, or Microsoft rather, we do have bare metal nodes already in existence. There are, my brain's flooding out now. 6 or 7 in Amazon. There's more coming. And by the end of this year, we'll be in every zone in Amazon, every region in Amazon. And then Azure, we have 4 or 5 bare metal nodes available that you can choose from and install Nutanix right on top of that. That's one option. So if you needed to move into the cloud or clouds, you can do both simultaneously. And here's the great thing. I won't talk about egress charges because there's always an egress charge. But if you're in Amazon and Amazon and Azure and both running Nutanix, you can migrate your workloads from one to the other and back seamlessly. Now, obviously, there is an egress charge to that, so that's a cautionary thing. And we do have some customers that do have their workloads in both, but you don't have to be up in Azure, migrate down on premises, recode, replatform, repurpose the applications, and then move them back up into AWS. None of that's even necessary. You literally just do like a vMotion across to the two, as long as they're connected properly. And that's an architectural conversation. But at a high level, it's very simple. At a lower level, obviously, there's some complexities to it. Nutanix Flow is a component that is required for that to be active. But in those licenses, you're going to have Nutanix Flow anyway. The other option we recently announced is we call it multi-cloud snapshot technology. What if you just want storage space for DR? Because, for example, healthcare, you're required to have 3 copies of your data, or 3 sites, as it were, or data copies. So you have site 1 and site 2, but what about site 3? Well, maybe you just burst it up into the cloud and you have a bunch of S3 storage, but you don't need to spin up Nutanix nodes to do that. You literally can do a Nutanix snapshot replication into those S3 buckets And in the event of a disaster, it's not an RPO zero kind of a thing. So this is definitely not a mission critical kind of recovery, but you can spin up Nutanix nodes in the cloud. Just get your bare metal nodes, get your AWS licenses, or in this case, it's only on AWS today. That will soon be available for Azure as well. But this multi-cloud snapshot technology allows you to take your S3 buckets that you've been snapping into or replicating into, spin up some adjacent EC2 bare metal nodes that run your Nutanix's licenses over there, and then rehydrate into the cloud, and then you can actually run your data center in the cloud. So it's a really cool, flexible option to allow customers really to kind of build their BCDR strategy how they want to. If you need an RPO zero, like RTO zero kind of a conversation, that's obviously going to be a metro cluster, local data center kind of a thing. But this is another great option for backup and recovery in the event of a disaster. So those are just some ways. I might have missed something there, Rick, but this is a few ways that we operate in the cloud.
Yeah, I think it's just very telling just how flexible the platform itself is and the ability to do what you just said in terms of being able to, and again, not an RPO or RTO zero type situation, but as a last resort, having the ability to stand up Nutanix in the cloud and then take those snapshots and bring them back and rehydrate them into your Nutanix clusters. It just gives you that flexibility in the security and knowing that you can do that. And let's hope that no one ever has to do that, but having that ability is, as I said before, kind of that last resort, but it does give you that flexibility to be able to do that quickly. And again, I can't see the screen, so I want to just make a check, make sure we have no questions or hands raised, so we're not missing anything.
I don't see anything. Annie, I don't know if you're seeing anything there on your side.
Nope, nothing on this side yet.
Folks, you are welcome to drop any questions you want in there about whatever we talk about. We'll happily, there's no script here, so if it wasn't obvious, so we'll happily go off script and answer any questions you have, even if it's about barbecue.
Ask questions. We are more than happy to take live questions. Nothing is scripted. Hopefully, we'll have any plants in the audience. I'm pretty sure we don't. But nonetheless, let's see if there's any questions out there. But I think one of the other things too is also looking at some of the other additional things, Charlie, like NDB, right, and looking at what that can do for customers running databases. If you want to touch briefly on that.
Yeah, so Nutanix, NDB, Nutanix Database Services. I know it should be like NDBS or something like that, but we like to simplify things and confuse you even further with our naming. Kidding aside, though, Nutanix Database Services is actually really, really valuable. So it was born out of the HCI thing we talked about earlier. We had a customer, a massive customer. I don't think they're referenceable, so I can't say their name, but they're a global organization. They have 100,000 something databases. It's some insane number. And they said, hey, they were a Nutanix customer. They said, hey, can you do for databases like what you did for can you do for databases what you did for the rest of my enterprise? And we were like, well, okay. And out of that was born the code for Nutanix Database Services. And so NDB is a database management service. So it's a DBMS. For those of you who have Oracle, you probably have the Oracle DBMS. If you're a Microsoft SQL shop, you probably have Microsoft's version. If you're Postgres or if you're MySQL or Mongo, you might have one or two other third-party ones. And most of you don't have just one database platform. I don't think anybody really does anymore. I think most people are like Oracle and Microsoft SQL and MS SQL and Postgres and blah, blah, blah. And so what happens is we saw an opportunity to come in there with the customer and say, well, you want us to manage all of your different database types? Let's give it a shot. And we did it. And NDB is a database management service that sits outside of the data path. So we're not interrupting the data path, just to be really clear. It's literally just a database management service that is designed to do things like automated provisioning, storage zero cloning, snapshotting backups, some security components and so forth to protect the data on your databases, to allow you to do tests and migrations of your databases. It's great for devs who just want to get in there and say, oh, we're going to roll out a new such and such. Well, let's go ahead and see what that patch is going to look like. So you take a database, build an automatic, like I said, tiers, like a storage zero clone, and then you can upgrade that clone and see what happens to your tables and stuff like that, or what happens to the database. Does it blow up? Does it work for your environment? You can take your production data and clone the whole stinking thing over to a dev environment and then go out there and do all these kinds of tests. or rebuilds or what ifs. And it really gives customers the flexibility to manage their databases. And it takes a lot of the DBA's time away from the common day-to-day nonsense, just like we did with HCI for VM admins. We do the same thing now for database admins, so they can spend more time in really mission critical, like app development and deployment, because everybody needs a database for that. Or spend time doing the innovation around their database platforms. What are we doing with our databases? How are we doing this to be more competitive in the environment? How are we delivering to our CIOs and CTOs and the whole C-suite the things they're asking for around the business? How do we create better, faster, bigger business outcomes for our competitive environment while still maintaining the integrity of our databases? And that's where NDB comes in. I kind of oversimplified it a little bit. We can do a whole presentation on that. That's a whole different thing altogether, but it's yeah, it's a great platform, and I think it's highly underutilized. We just upgraded it a few weeks before GTS as well, and we expanded the databases that we support, EDBs in there and a few others. And we've also secured it to be faster, a little more agile, and a lot leaner in terms of resource utilization, and yet even more capable than ever.
Absolutely. I think it's important, especially as databases become critically important as we move forward, right? Especially, with just think about the sheer amount of data being generated and being stored in databases, right? It's very necessary to ensure protection. And of course, with dev teams, as you mentioned, coming in and needing access to that data, but you don't necessarily want to give them access to production data, right? And so you want to be able to give them at least a working set of data that is as closely as close of a replica to the actual production data as possible, but you don't want to give them access to it. So you can make them a copy of that data, give them access to that data, and then go and refresh it even on a daily basis if need be. But you're still protecting your data, making sure that everything is secure, that the data is safe, the data is valid, and so it just, I think, gives a lot of flexibility to, and above and beyond what you get from just the Nutanix platform, right? It adds on value to running the Nutanix platform and going in and managing your databases.
And I will say this, you do not need NDB to run your databases on Nutanix. It's a virtualized environment.
Correct.
So but if you're going to virtualize your databases, you should look at NDB, especially if you have, several thousand VMs or databases rather that you want to try to manage, especially if there are multiple types, which they usually are. Again, if you're Oracle, if you go to Oracle plus MS SQL, if you have more than two, I'd say give NDB a real cost analysis and see what the value is for you. Worst case is you're just going to virtualize it and put it on Nutanix and run it better anyway. But from an Oracle perspective, I can tell you that we have seen our customers actually save cost without changing much of anything, because the way Nutanix is structured and the organization of the platform itself, even without NDB, the license cost mitigation that we have provided our customers usually pays for NDB just for Oracle alone. And that, again, that's a whole other conversation, but I think it's worth giving it a look and talking to if you're a DBA especially, go talk to your admins and your whoever runs your IT shops and ask, can we look into this? Rick, we've got a question, and it looks like Caitlin's asking, how viable is Nutanix for a VDI environment? I love that question. Caitlin, when my team started selling Nutanix when I was at a partner, 99% of our opportunities were VDI based. And of course, I'm making that number up. I'm slightly facetious there, but it seemed like every opportunity was VDI based. And I think two reasons. One, generally speaking, I think any hyper-converged platform is a great platform for VDI if it provides you the tools you need to be successful, right? Usually like a single interface, login, and everything like that. But Nutanix kind of takes it a step further with our EUC licensing, where we provide file storage on top of it, not just generic disk storage that's assigned by node or whatever like that, but we actually do aggregate all of the storage, and then you can assign it by user. And it's a great platform. It has been again one of our top use cases for the last 15 years, and we just released a tech note on. It's publicly accessible. I can send it to somebody if you need to, or I can send it to Rick and he can distribute it out. A tech note on how to run Amnisa, which was Horizon, is now Amnisa. on Nutanix, and there's more to come futures-wise on Omnisa support within AHV. It is called Naked Omnisa, I think is the code name for it on the Omnisa end. But we've been Citrix partners forever, it seems like, and they have been a phenomenal partner of ours since pretty much day one. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know if
Yeah,
you
one
have
other
any
thing
other
too that I
comment.
would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say one other thing I'd bring to that is when you look at VDI and the nature of VDI and how things are spun up, right? Especially for a larger farm, I think one of the real benefits around Nutanix, and for everyone to go out and look at the data storage fabric information out on nutanixbible.com, having that data locality, right, and having it follow the virtual machine if and when that machine gets moved, right, is critical in terms of performance, right? And that's one of the biggest things we hear from customers in terms of performance, especially as we get into these larger VDI environments, is, sometimes performance is not always necessarily up to snuff. And there's a multitude of reasons that can happen, right? But one of the reasons is potentially looking at things like data path, where the actual VDI files are located, the access to them, especially looking at like a pod architecture, right, and seeing where that happens and where the data is being pulled from. But with the data locality feature in Nutanix and how it moves the data to where that VM, or in this case a VDI instance, lives, really helps contribute to keep the performance of those VDI infrastructures at a very high level. And so, again, that's something that I think, to answer the question, VDI works very well on Nutanix, and it actually, I think, works better than in a lot of cases than any sort of a three-tiered architecture that most customers I find are running today.
Yeah, I mean, the storage is, like, to your point, it's sitting right there. And one of the cool things is, in a typical HCI environment, yeah, everybody provides some level of resiliency and redundancy. But to your point, Rick, like what Nutanix has always done is, not only do we have at least 2 copies of data, but they're distributed. And in the event of a failure, see, Nutanix Dheeraj Pandey, who founded, one of the founders of Nutanix, told me one time, he's like, we expect things to fail. Like, we just expect failure. So we're going to design around failure. And this is one of the ways they did it. And so in the event of a failure, if my VM is running here on node A, and I've got to rely on node C now for the data, because that's where one of my other copies is, then not only does the data start reading off of node C, but then we also will move the C, or rather move the data to the C VM there and read closest to it, so that we minimize the IO latency, and it's just sitting there right on top of each other every time possible. So it's not always instant, because a failure might just be a blip. And so the system self-heals and allows that to happen, so we don't cause a bunch of IO going like crazy in the event of a bunch of serious failures. So
Exactly.
see, it says we have a Nutanix renewal due in about 8 months, and we're looking at alternatives like Nutanix and OpenShift. Would moving to Nutanix save us money over renewing our Broadcom contracts? That's a great question. And it's a harder question to answer because every environment and every contract is different. So the short answer is probably. The longer answer is maybe not right away, but let's look at the ROI. So Nutanix, obviously, you can do the double bubble thing and run 2 hypervisors simultaneously. You can have AHV and you can have ESXi on the same stack, and then eventually migrate over if that's what your plan is. And it's a great off-ramp solution, but it does cost, right? If you're not in a hardware refresh cycle, that can be expensive. So I want to be open and honest about that. But in terms of FTE management cost savings, overall license cost savings, and the value given back to the organization in terms of reduced number of skills required. So we, instead of having a whole bunch of different skills, specialized skills, now everyone can have generalized skills, and we can all run the system together as a team. Really brings the idea of putting your people's time back into innovation and market. That's a value too. It might be soft, it might be hard, it depends on who your CFO is, but those are real values that Nutanix brings at a minimum. But always talk to your Converge sales reps and your Nutanix sales teams, and let's have that conversation about value. OpenShift is a great platform. It also runs on Nutanix and vice versa to an extent. So we're great partners with Red Hat. I will say that in my experience as an old VMware guy, the move from VM to OpenShift is a lot more difficult. Moving from VM VMware environment ESXi to Nutanix. I can tell you, because it's a customer that is open about it, JetBlue went all in on Nutanix, including getting rid of ESXi and going on AHV for their hypervisor. And within 1 week, their entire management team was running the show. So it doesn't take the on ramp for Nutanix is very, very slim. At first it's a shell shock, and then when reality sets in, you realize, oh, this is actually pretty easy. The management gets easier, and that's where the cost savings really start kicking in. But we may be less expensive right off the bat. Again, let's talk to your sales teams and find that out. And then Rick, I'll let you answer this one real quick. It says, how does Nutanix stack up feature-wise to VMware vSphere?
I mean, I would say with very rare instances, it's pretty much the equivalent. I mean, there are certain things that are done a little bit differently, or there are certain things that may not necessarily be apparent right off the bat. But I'd say in terms of the feature comparison, at least from all of the different alternatives that are available today that our customers are looking at, Nutanix is probably the closest, and I'd say probably 99% of the features and functions that you have today in vSphere are going to be available to you in Nutanix.
Yeah, and I will share one quick thing for everyone here just to see what he's talking about. But there's your kind of feature compare, and by name, so you can see where it's at. And you notice the one thing that's not on there is the VMC piece, because it's not really a part of VMware. It's a whole separate license. But there's your vSphere VVF, I believe, stack versus Nutanix. And while I'm not a big fan of going feature to feature and trying to show, oh, hey, look at us, I think a better solution is, what are you using? What are you doing? What are the outcomes you're striving for? And let's solve it that way, rather than just jam a bunch of products at you that you're not going to use anyway. So just as a visual, that's what Rick's talking about right there.
Right. And I know we're at the top of the hour. Annie, I didn't know if we needed to allow you to kind of close us out, or if we had any other questions that we need to answer, but I do want to make sure that we try to be respectful of everybody's time.
So looks like we have one additional question, and that one came directly to me. My apologies. Does Nutanix support external storage like Pure or NetApp?
The short answer is not today. The longer answer is maybe in the future. And a little bit more complicated answer is, we have Dell PowerFlex that is in early access now with a few customers that are hand selected by Dell. And that is external IP attached storage. And so Dell PowerFlex should GA this summer. Around this summer, and then at the end of the year, we're going to have GA plus one, or V1 plus available in the fall winter timeframe from Dell and Nutanix combined. And that is a solution that is coming. It is very real, and it is a combination of Dell PowerFlex compute only nodes and Dell PowerFlex storage. I forget the name of the storage, forgive me, but it is IP attached. Is more coming. I think, never say never. And with what we've talked about today as a highlight of what we're doing, Nutanix is constantly developing and evolving to match what our customers need. And we realize that a lot of you have major investments in a lot of 3-tier architecture that is just simply too expensive to replace today. Maybe tomorrow or some other refresh cycle, sure. But if you could run your other storage today, that's a benefit to you. And we recognize that. So again, never say never, but today, no.
Yeah, I'd say it's a not yet with an asterisk. And, as roadmaps change, roadmaps get modified. I would say, to your point, it's with the advent of the PowerFlex IP attached storage and all of that, the leap to go from there to other vendors is probably not significant, but there's nothing that has been announced yet.
Now, I will say this real quick, is Nutanix has always supported IP attached in-guest ingestment of data. So like if you run your VMs on Nutanix and you need to point out to an IP attached NetApp or something like that, you can always do in-guest, but you just can't run Nutanix on a third-party storage. So I just want to be clear that that's always been an option. It is kludgy. It's not the most efficient options, but if you're just going out there and poking at data and grabbing it on occasion, it's certainly an option, right? But that's definitely probably the lowest usage of your NetApp, your Pure storage today, I'm sure.
Right. Hopefully that answered the question.
For now. ...
For now. Exactly. All right. Any other questions? Or I think we're definitely over, but definitely appreciate everybody's time and attention, and hopefully we can answer any additional questions if you want to reach out to your Converge representatives or Amy. So Amy, I'll hand it over to you if you have to do any housekeeping.
Rick, you've wrapped it up perfectly. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or perhaps congratulatory remarks, please reach out to your Converge rep and look for the follow-up correspondence that you'll get from me that will have a meeting link. And if you take a meeting with us, we will send you an espresso virtual. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next event. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.